North Sentinel Island sits like a forbidden jewel in the Bay of Bengal, home to the Sentinelese, the last uncontacted tribe on Earth. For 60,000 years, they've killed anyone who dared approach their shores. But Dr. Sarah Chen knows something the world doesn't. Hidden beneath her disgraced reputation as a failed quantum researcher lies a devastating truth. She's seen this fire before, in classified experiments that cost her career and nearly her sanity. The satellite feeds don't lie. The flame burns without wood, without oxygen, without any earthly fuel. It pulses with an energy signature that matches her forbidden research the government buried along with her reputation. As military forces gather and the fire's glow intensifies nightly, Sarah realizes the Sentinelese aren't protecting their island from the world. They're protecting the world from something far worse. The question that haunts her sleepless nights: what if the fire isn't just burning? What if it's waiting? Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted the resolution on her computer screen, the stolen satellite imagery casting an eerie blue glow across her cramped apartment. 3 years had passed since the Department of Defense stripped her of her security clearance. 3 years of teaching freshman physics at a community college, while the scientific establishment pretended she'd never existed. Yet here she was, staring at the impossible. The flame rose 50 feet into the night sky, a brilliant column of white-hot energy that showed no signs of diminishing. According to the thermal readings she'd hacked from NASA's monitoring system, the fire had been burning at exactly 2,847 degrees Celsius for the past 6 months, the same temperature she'd recorded during Project Prometheus before everything went to hell. She reached for her coffee mug with shaking fingers, remembering the day her world collapsed. The screaming alarms in the underground facility, the evacuation orders, the way Dr. Marcus Webb had looked at her with pure terror before the containment protocols sealed them in separate chambers. The official report blamed equipment failure, but Sarah knew better. They'd succeeded in creating a stable quantum flame, a self-sustaining energy source that violated thermodynamics, and it had nearly killed everyone in a 50-mile radius. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Sarah hesitated before answering. "Dr. Chen?" The voice was crisp, military. "This is Colonel James Morrison, Pentagon Strategic Research Division. I believe you've been monitoring certain satellite feeds." The coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Andaman Sea Thermal Anomaly. We know you've been tracking it for weeks. We need to talk." Sarah's mouth went dry. After 3 years of silence, why were they calling now? "I'm not cleared for—" "The situation has changed, Doctor. The energy output increased by 40% last night. Your expertise in quantum flame dynamics makes you uniquely qualified to assess the threat." Threat. The word sent ice through her veins. During Project Prometheus, the quantum flame had shown disturbing signs of intelligence, responding to electromagnetic stimuli in ways that suggested awareness. When containment failed, the flame had seemed to reach toward populated areas as if drawn to human consciousness itself. "Send a car," she whispered. "Already outside." Sarah peered through her blinds at the black sedan idling below. How long had they been watching? She grabbed her laptop and the encrypted hard drive she'd hidden in her bedroom, the only remaining evidence of her real research. 20 minutes later, she sat across from Colonel Morrison in a windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and fear. Morrison was younger than she'd expected, with prematurely grey hair and the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd seen too many classified horrors. "The Sentinelese have been observed performing coordinated movements around the flame site," Morrison said, sliding photographs across the table. "Ritualistic behavior that began exactly when the energy output started increasing." Sarah studied the aerial shots. Dozens of figures moved in precise geometric patterns around the towering flame, their formations resembling the quantum field equations she'd developed years ago. Impossible. How could an isolated tribe know theoretical physics that hadn't even been published? There's more, Morrison continued. Radio telescopes are detecting structured signals emanating from the island, mathematical sequences that match no known language or code. A chill crawled up Sarah's spine. During the final Prometheus experiment, their quantum flame had begun transmitting similar signals just before containment failed. Webb had theorized they were creating a beacon, though for what, they'd never determined. "You think it's connected to my research," Sarah said. "I think your research opened a door, Doctor, and something on that island has been holding it shut for a very long time." Morrison leaned forward. "The question is, how long before they can't hold it anymore?" Sarah stared at the photographs, watching shadows dance around an impossible fire. Somewhere in the Bay of Bengal, the last guardians of humanity maintained their ancient vigil, and time was running out. The satellite data arrived at 3:17 a.m., transmitted through encrypted channels to Dr. Elena Vasquez's cramped apartment above a Mumbai tea shop. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, cross-referencing thermal imaging patterns with historical meteorological records, searching for any conventional explanation for what the ESA satellites had captured 3 days earlier. The new images made her stomach drop. The flame had doubled in size. Elena rubbed her bloodshot eyes and leaned closer to her laptop screen. The infrared readings showed a thermal signature that should have been impossible, a concentrated heat source burning at over 2,000 degrees Celsius, yet the surrounding vegetation remained completely unaffected. More disturbing still, the spectral analysis revealed no chemical combustion signatures, no carbon dioxide emissions, no particulate matter. Nothing that should accompany any known form of fire. Her secure phone buzzed. The caller ID showed only a series of numbers she recognized as originating from the European Space Agency headquarters in Paris. "Dr. Vasquez," her voice came out hoarse from exhaustion. "Elena, it's Marcus Webb. I hope I didn't wake you." She almost laughed. Marcus had been her research partner during the Geneva incident 5 years ago, back when her reputation in the quantum physics community hadn't been permanently tarnished. Now he was the ESA's Director of Anomalous Phenomena Research, a position that existed largely because of the increasing number of unexplained events their satellites were detecting worldwide. "I've been staring at your data for the past day and a half," Elena said, minimizing the thermal imaging window and pulling up her preliminary analysis. "Marcus, this isn't just unusual, this is categorically impossible. That's why I'm calling. How quickly can you get to Kolkata?" Elena felt her pulse quicken. "You're not seriously considering—" "There's a research vessel leaving from Diamond Harbor tomorrow evening. The MV Meridian. I've already cleared you with the Maritime Security Agency, but Elena—" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "This has to stay completely off the books. The kind of energy readings we're detecting from that location could revolutionize our understanding of thermodynamics. Or it could be something far more dangerous." Elena stared at the satellite image, still glowing on her screen. The flame appeared as a white-hot point of light surrounded by the dark expanse of the Bay of Bengal, like a star that had fallen to Earth and refused to burn out. "The Sentinelese have been protecting that island for thousands of years," she said carefully. "The Indian government has made contact attempts illegal since 2018. We'd be violating international law. Not if we maintain a safe distance. The Meridian is equipped with long-range spectrographic equipment and quantum field detectors. We can collect meaningful data without setting foot on North Sentinel Island." Elena closed her eyes, remembering the last time she had chased an impossible energy signature. The particle accelerator at CERN. The gravitational anomalies that had appeared for exactly 4.3 seconds before the entire facility lost power. The 14 researchers who had been hospitalized with what the medical team could only describe as cellular temporal displacement. Her career had ended that day. 5 years of exile from the scientific community, reduced to accepting freelance analysis contracts from government agencies, desperate enough to overlook her tainted reputation. But this was different. The energy patterns in the satellite data didn't match anything she had seen before the Geneva incident. Where those readings had suggested a localized disruption in space-time, these thermal signatures appeared almost organic, as if the flame itself was alive and growing. "Elena, are you still there?" She opened her eyes and focused on the coordinates displayed at the bottom of her screen. 11°33, Phaeton, 92°15 feet. North Sentinel Island, home to one of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth. For centuries, the Sentinelese had violently repelled all attempts at contact from the outside world, firing arrows at helicopters and killing anyone who managed to reach their shores. What kind of secret were they protecting? "I'll need full access to the ship's quantum detection equipment," she said finally. "And I want real-time data feeds, not processed summaries." "Done. Also, I want hazard pay and a signed acknowledgement that this expedition was initiated by the ESA. If something goes wrong, I'm not taking the blame alone this time." Marcus was quiet for several seconds. "Elena, there's something else you should know. You're not the only scientist we've contacted about this anomaly. 3 quantum physicists from different institutions have been monitoring the thermal signatures. 2 of them have already declined to participate in any field research. Who was the third? Dr. James Okafor from the Nigerian Space Research Center. He was supposed to join the expedition, but he disappeared from his Lagos hotel room 2 days ago. Local police found his research notes scattered across the floor and his laptop completely wiped. Elena felt ice spread through her veins. Disappeared how? No signs of struggle, no witnesses. He simply vanished, along with all of his preliminary analysis of the flame data. The satellite image seemed to pulse on her screen, the impossible fire burning brighter with each passing hour, defying every law of physics she had spent her career trying to understand. The helicopter's rotors cut through the humid air as Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the window, watching the endless expanse of the Bay of Bengal stretch below. 3 days had passed since Director Morrison's ultimatum, and she still couldn't shake the feeling that accepting this assignment was either the smartest or stupidest decision of her career. 20 minutes out, the pilot's voice crackled through her headset. She nodded, though her attention remained fixed on the quantum resonance detector mounted beside her seat. The device hummed with an almost musical frequency, its readings fluctuating in patterns she'd never encountered before. A tablet displayed the latest satellite imagery from North Sentinel Island, each frame more bewildering than the last. The flame that shouldn't exist had grown by another 12% overnight, its ethereal blue-white glow now visible even through the dense canopy. Whatever was happening down there violated every principle of thermodynamics she'd spent 15 years studying. The helicopter banked sharply, and Sarah's stomach lurched. Below, a dark speck emerged from the morning haze. North Sentinel Island, home to the world's most isolated tribe and, apparently, the world's greatest scientific anomaly. "Dr. Chen," the pilot's voice carried a note of concern, "I'm getting some strange interference on the instruments. Nothing dangerous, but—" "What kind of interference?" Sarah leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "Electromagnetic. Like there's a massive radio source down there, but it's not showing on any frequency we monitor." Sarah checked her detector again. The readings had tripled in the past 5 minutes, the mathematical harmonics creating patterns that seemed almost intentional. She pulled up her tablet and began recording everything, her fingers flying across the screen as she documented each anomaly. The island grew larger, revealing pristine beaches and impenetrable jungle. Somewhere within that green maze lived the Sentinelese, a tribe that had rejected all contact with the outside world for thousands of years. The Indian government had declared the island off-limits, protecting both the tribe's isolation and outsiders' safety. Stories of arrows and spears greeting uninvited visitors weren't folklore, they were documented reality. "There," Sarah breathed, spotting a faint shimmer above the tree line near the island's center. Even from this distance she could see it, a column of impossible light rising into the morning sky, wavering like heat mirage but clearly visible against the clouds. The quantum resonance detector suddenly screamed, its readings spiking beyond the measurement scale. Sarah fumbled with the controls, trying to recalibrate, when something extraordinary happened. The interference pattern on her screen began forming geometric shapes, complex, interlocking fractals that pulsed in rhythm with the distant flame. "My God," she whispered. This wasn't random quantum noise. This was structured, organized, almost like Dr. Chen. The pilot's voice was sharp with alarm. "All my navigation systems just went dark. We need to turn back now." But Sarah was transfixed by what she was seeing. The patterns on her screen were mathematical proofs, written in quantum mechanics, each fractal sequence solving equations that shouldn't exist. It was as if the flame itself was communicating, teaching, demonstrating principles of physics that humanity hadn't discovered yet. The helicopter shuddered as another electromagnetic pulse washed over them. Through the window, Sarah could see the flame more clearly now, not the simple fire of burning wood or gas, but something far more complex. It twisted and danced with purpose, its light bending in ways that hurt her eyes to follow. "We're losing altitude," the pilot announced, his hands working frantically over dead controls. "Whatever's down there, it's affecting everything electronic." Sarah's detector gave one final, ear-splitting tone before going silent. But in that last moment, she caught something that made her heart race. The quantum signatures she was reading weren't just defying physics, they were rewriting it. The energy patterns suggested matter conversion on a scale that should have been impossible without massive industrial infrastructure. Yet here it was, burning in the middle of an isolated jungle, tended by people who supposedly lived in the Stone Age. The helicopter lurched as the pilot fought to maintain control with manual systems. 30 seconds to minimum safe distance, he called out. "After that, we're landing in the ocean." Sarah grabbed her emergency pack and made sure all her data was backed up to the satellite uplink. Whatever was happening on North Sentinel Island, she'd captured enough evidence to prove the phenomenon was real. But proof wasn't understanding, and understanding was what she needed if she was going to unravel this mystery. As they banked away from the island, fighting to escape the electromagnetic interference, Sarah took one last look at the impossible flame. For just a moment she could have sworn she saw figures moving in the jungle below, human silhouettes watching their retreat with the patience of people who had been guarding secrets for millennia. The detector in her lap remained silent, but the implications of what she'd recorded were anything but quiet. This wasn't just about physics anymore. This was about rewriting everything humanity thought it knew about energy, matter, and the nature of reality itself. The helicopter's rotors carved through humid air as Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the window, watching the endless expanse of the Bay of Bengal stretch below. 48 hours had passed since her meeting with Director Chen, and now she found herself aboard a military transport heading toward coordinates that supposedly didn't exist on any official map. Beside her sat Captain Marcus Torres, a weathered man whose steady presence had been her anchor since leaving the mainland. His dark eyes scanned tactical displays while Elena reviewed the classified briefings Chen had finally released. The documents painted a picture that challenged everything she thought she knew about the Sentinelese people. "According to these reports," Elena said, raising her voice over the engine noise, "the tribe has been observed performing synchronized movements around the flame during specific lunar phases. The satellite thermal readings spike during these events." Torres glanced at the data, his expression unreadable. "My grandfather told stories about lights in the sky over these waters. Fishermen's tales, we thought. Maybe not so crazy after all." The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets, approaching the exclusion zone perimeter. "We've got company." Elena looked up to see 2 Indian Navy patrol boats cutting through the waves below, their wake forming perfect white arrows on the dark water. The boats maintained a precise distance from a cluster of forested islands barely visible through the morning haze. "North Sentinel Island," Torres confirmed, pointing to the largest landmass, "home to the world's most isolated people, And apparently, your impossible flame. Elena studied the enhanced satellite images spread across her lap. The infrared signatures showed a concentrated heat source deep within the island's interior, far from any known settlement. What disturbed her most wasn't the flame's intensity, but its geometric precision. The thermal bloom formed perfect concentric circles, each ring pulsing with mathematical regularity. "This pattern," she murmured, tracing the circles with her finger. "It's not random. There's a frequency here, almost like..." "Like what?" Torres leaned closer. "Like a signal." The helicopter banked sharply, following the patrol boat's trajectory. Elena's stomach lurched as she glimpsed movement on the shoreline below. Dark figures emerged from the tree line, their actions too coordinated to be coincidental. They'd been watching the sky. Her satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Chen. "Thermal readings spiked again 30 minutes ago. Whatever they're doing down there is accelerating." Elena's mind raced through possibilities. Conventional fire required fuel and oxygen, both finite resources, yet this flame had burned for generations without either running out. The heat signature suggested temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt copper, yet somehow contained within organic surroundings that should have been reduced to ash centuries ago. "Dr. Vasquez," the pilot's voice carried an edge of concern. "I'm picking up some unusual electromagnetic interference. Our instruments are fluctuating." Elena looked at her own equipment. The quantum field detectors she'd insisted on bringing were registering impossible readings. Space-time distortion markers that should only appear near massive gravitational sources were spiking intermittently, synchronized with the thermal pulses from below. "Torres, look at this." She showed him the readout. "These quantum fluctuations suggest the flame isn't just burning matter for fuel, it's drawing energy from somewhere else entirely." Before Torres could respond, the helicopter shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across the pilot's console as electrical systems flickered. Through the chaos, Elena heard something that made her blood run cold, a low, harmonic vibration that seemed to emanate from the island itself. "Emergency landing protocol," the pilot announced, "fighting to maintain control. All non-essential systems are failing." Elena watched in fascination as her quantum detectors peaked beyond their maximum thresholds. The readings suggested a localized breakdown in fundamental physical laws, as if reality itself was becoming unstable in proximity to the island. The helicopter descended rapidly toward a designated landing zone on a neighboring atoll, far enough from North Sentinel to avoid violating the tribe's protected status. As they touched down on the makeshift helipad, Elena noticed the interference patterns diminishing with distance, confirming her hypothesis about the flame's influence. Torres helped her gather the equipment while the pilot ran diagnostics on his systems. "Whatever's happening over there," he said grimly, "it's getting stronger. Our instruments went haywire at 15 kilometers out. 3 months ago, ships could approach within 5 kilometers without issues." Elena stared across the water toward North Sentinel Island, where smoke rose in a perfect vertical column despite the ocean winds. The tribe had guarded their secret for generations, but now that secret was growing beyond their ability to contain it. And according to Chen's data, the expansion was accelerating exponentially. "We need to establish communication somehow," she said. "If they're the guardians of something this powerful, they might be our only hope of understanding it before..." "Before what?" Elena didn't answer immediately. In her mind, she was calculating the quantum field expansion rates, projecting the timeline for global impact. The numbers were terrifying. Before it changes everything. The submersible deep current cut through the dark waters of the Bay of Bengal like a steel needle threading through black silk. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the reinforced porthole, watching bioluminescent creatures drift past in ethereal spirals. Somewhere far above, the monsoon had finally broken, sending sheets of rain across the surface she could no longer see. Depth holding steady at 200 meters, Captain Ravi Sharma called from the pilot's seat. His weathered hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. "We should reach the coordinates in 20 minutes. Sarah nodded, though her attention remained fixed on the quantum field detector mounted beside her workstation. The device had been registering increasingly erratic readings for the past hour, its display showing energy patterns that should have been impossible at this depth. According to every textbook she'd ever read, quantum coherence couldn't survive in such a chaotic environment. Yet here it was, defying explanation once again. "Tell me about the tribe," she said, turning away from the porthole. "The Sentinelese have been studied extensively, but these people seem to exist in complete isolation." Dr. Amara Okafor looked up from her ethnographic notes, her dark eyes reflecting the subdued lighting of the cabin. "The Keth Mori, that's what they call themselves, though we only learned that from satellite audio analysis. They've inhabited that island for at least 800 years, possibly longer. Unlike the Sentinelese, they don't actively repel visitors, they simply make them forget." "Forget?" "Every expedition that's attempted contact has returned with significant gaps in their memory. The researchers remember approaching the island, then finding themselves back at their base camps days later with no recollection of what happened in between." Amara's voice carried a note of unease. "The Indian government classified the island as off-limits in 1987 after a team of anthropologists was found wandering a beach in Tamil Nadu, 300 miles from where they'd started, with no memory of how they got there." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean's depth. "And the flame?" "First photographed by a British survey team in 1923. They described it as a pillar of blue-white fire rising from the center of the island, visible even in daylight. When they tried to land, their boat engines failed. They drifted for 6 hours before the engines mysteriously restarted, allowing them to escape." The quantum detector suddenly shrieked in alarm. Sarah spun toward it, her heart hammering as she read the display. The energy readings had spiked beyond the instrument's ability to measure, showing a coherence pattern that resembled nothing in known physics. "Captain, stop the boat," she ordered. Sharma's hands froze over the controls. "What is it?" "Something's happening. The quantum field is—" Sarah paused, struggling to find words for what she was seeing. "It's like the ocean itself is becoming coherent. Individual particles are somehow maintaining entanglement across vast distances." Through the porthole, she noticed something that made her breath catch. The water around them was beginning to glow, not with the random sparkle of plankton, but with organized patterns of light that pulsed in perfect synchronization. "Mother of God," Sharma whispered, his voice barely audible over the submersible's humming systems. The light grew brighter, forming geometric shapes that spiraled outward from a point somewhere ahead of them. Sarah watched in fascination as the patterns became increasingly complex, resembling the mathematical structures she'd spent years studying in quantum field theory. "It's beautiful," Amara breathed. "It's impossible," Sarah corrected, though she couldn't tear her eyes away from the display. The quantum detector was registering energy levels that should have torn apart the molecular structure of the water around them. Instead, everything seemed more stable, more ordered than it had any right to be. A new sound reached them through the submersible's hull, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic, purposeful, like a voice calling across impossible distances. "The island?" Sharma pointed ahead through the main viewing port. "I can see it." Sarah followed his gaze and felt her scientific worldview crack a little further. The island rose from the ocean floor like a dark jewel, but it wasn't the landmass that captured her attention. It was the column of light that erupted from its center, a pillar of pure energy that stretched upward through the water toward the surface far above. The flame was burning underwater. "That's not possible," she whispered, even as she watched it happen. Fire required oxygen, fuel, a chemical reaction that couldn't exist in this environment. Yet there it was, a beacon of impossible light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat. The quantum detector's alarms fell silent. The display showed something that made Sarah's hands tremble as she reached for her recording equipment. The energy signature was stable, coherent, and absolutely perfect, a quantum field state that theory said could only exist at absolute zero temperature. But they were surrounded by ocean water at 4 degrees Celsius, and somehow, impossibly, the laws of physics were bending around that impossible flame. The tremor that shook Dr. Sarah Chen's hotel room at 3:47 a.m. wasn't listed in any seismic database. She knew because she'd been awake since midnight, cross-referencing thermal satellite data with tectonic activity reports, searching for any conventional explanation for what she'd witnessed on Sentinel Island. The coffee had long since gone cold, her laptop screen casting an eerie blue glow across her face as she studied the impossible readings. The flame wasn't just burning without fuel, it was generating energy at an exponential rate. According to her calculations, the thermal output had increased by 14% in just the past 72 hours. At this rate, the temperature differential would be detectable from low Earth orbit within a week, making their window for investigation critically narrow. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, her former research partner at CERN before the Barcelona incident destroyed both their careers. His text was characteristically blunt. "Turn on channel 7. Now." Sarah fumbled for the remote, switching to the local news station. A young reporter stood on a dock in Port Blair, the Andaman Sea churning behind her in the pre-dawn darkness. Unprecedented seismic activity centered approximately 30 kilometers southwest of our location. Dr. Rajesh Gupta from the Indian Institute of Science states that the energy signature is unlike anything in recorded geological history. The camera cut to a bearded man in wire-rimmed glasses, his expression troubled. The readings suggest a massive energy release occurring beneath the seafloor, but there's no corresponding tectonic movement. It's as if something is generating tremendous heat without any identifiable source. Sarah's blood ran cold. The flame wasn't just growing stronger, it was affecting the surrounding geology. She grabbed her satellite phone and dialed the number Marcus had given her 3 days ago. "You're seeing this too," came his voice without preamble. "The thermal bloom is expanding beyond the island's perimeter. Look at grid reference Delta 7 on the MODIS feeds from yesterday." "Already did." "Sarah, whatever that thing is, it's not just defying thermodynamics. It's rewriting them. The water temperature in a 2-kilometer radius around Sentinel Island has risen 3 degrees Celsius. 3 degrees. Enough to trigger massive ecosystem disruption, enough to kill everything in the surrounding coral reefs. And if it continued expanding, how long do we have?" she asked. "Based on the acceleration curve, maybe 2 weeks before the thermal signature becomes visible to commercial satellites. After that, every government and corporation on the planet will know something extraordinary is happening out there." Through her hotel window, Sarah could see fishing boats returning to harbor, their diesel engines coughing black smoke into the humid air. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that 30 kilometers away, the fundamental laws of reality were being violated on an industrial scale. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "I've been running the spectral analysis through quantum field equations. The energy pattern, it's coherent, Sarah, organized. This isn't some natural phenomenon. The implication hung between them like a live wire. Organized energy suggested intelligence, design, purpose. Who else knows about this? Officially? Just us and whoever's monitoring those military satellites. Unofficially? Dr. Elena Vasquez at MIT has been asking very pointed questions about anomalous thermal readings in the Bay of Bengal. She's smart enough to connect the dots if she gets access to the right data." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering Barcelona. The Hadron Collider experiment that had gone catastrophically wrong, creating a microscopic black hole that existed for exactly 1.3 seconds before evaporating, long enough to validate her theoretical work on exotic matter. Long enough to terrify the scientific community into shutting down the entire project and blacklisting everyone involved. She'd spent 2 years in academic exile, watching her life's work disappear into classified government files. But this was different. This was bigger than particle physics, bigger than career rehabilitation. If her suspicions were correct, the flame on Sentinel Island represented a technology that could solve the energy crisis, revolutionize space travel, or destroy civilization. "We need to get closer," she said finally. "The Indian Navy has established a 5-kilometer exclusion zone. Military vessels only. Then we don't go through official channels." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, the Sentinelese have killed outsiders for less than approaching their shore. Even if we could get past the naval patrols, landing on that island would be suicide." She stared at the thermal imaging data on her screen, watching the bright white core pulse like a heartbeat. Somewhere in that impossible fire lay answers to questions humanity hadn't even learned to ask yet. The tribe that guarded it had kept this secret for centuries, watching over a technology that could reshape the world. "Maybe," she said, "but staying away might be genocide." The line went dead as another tremor shook the building, stronger this time. Outside, car alarms began wailing, and in the distance she could hear the deep horn of a cargo ship leaving port, heading away from whatever was stirring in the dark waters beyond the horizon. The Zodiac cut through the morning swells as Dr. Elena Vasquez gripped the satellite phone, her knuckles white against the black rubber casing. The voice on the other end crackled through layers of encryption and atmospheric interference. "The thermal signature has increased by another 12% overnight," Dr. Sarah Chen reported from the MIT monitoring station. "Elena, whatever's happening on that island, it's accelerating." Elena watched the distant shoreline of North Sentinel Island emerge through the salt spray. Behind her, the research vessel Meridian held position at the 12-nautical-mile mark, its crew maintaining the legally mandated distance from the protected waters. But Elena wasn't bound by maritime law anymore. She'd burned those bridges when she'd convinced the Indian Coast Guard to look the other way for exactly 4 hours. "Any change in the electromagnetic readings?" Elena asked, adjusting the waterproof case containing her quantum field detectors. "That's the strangest part. The EM signature is completely stable, almost artificially so. It's like the energy source is self-regulating, compensating for the increased output." Elena ended the call and checked her equipment one final time. The modified Geiger counter remained silent, but the quantum coherence detector was already showing anomalous readings, and they were still 3 kilometers from shore. Whatever was generating that eternal flame wasn't just defying thermodynamics, it was rewriting the fundamental rules of energy conservation. Kiran Raj, the young anthropologist who'd volunteered for this suicide mission, pointed toward the beach where dark figures had begun to gather. "They know we're coming." Through her binoculars, Elena counted at least 20 Sentinelese warriors, their traditional bows already strung and ready. The tribe had remained uncontacted for over 60,000 years, violently rejecting every attempt at outside communication. Just 5 years ago, they'd killed a missionary within hours of his landing. "Remember the protocol," Elena said, more to calm her own nerves than to remind Kiran. "We land, we observe the flame, we document everything we can in 30 minutes maximum, then we leave. No attempts at communication, no sudden movements. And if they attack?" Elena's hand moved instinctively to the emergency beacon clipped to her vest. "Then we hope the Coast Guard can reach our bodies before the sharks do." The Zodiac's engine coughed as Kiran throttled down, riding the surf toward the narrow strip of white sand. The warriors on the beach had spread into a defensive line, but Elena noticed something odd about their positioning. They weren't guarding the landing site. Instead, they formed a protective semicircle around something further inland, something hidden by the dense jungle canopy. As the boat's hull scraped against sand, Elena's quantum detector began clicking rapidly. The readings were off the charts, indicating levels of coherent energy that should have been impossible to generate outside of a particle accelerator. More disturbing, the energy seemed to be responding to their presence, growing stronger as they approached. Elena stepped into knee-deep water, holding her equipment above her head. The Sentinelese warriors watched in absolute silence, their painted faces unreadable. She'd expected shouting, warning shots, the chaos of territorial defense. Instead, she found something far more unsettling. A patient, almost ceremonial stillness, as if their arrival had been anticipated. Following the tree line, Elena spotted what she'd come to find. Above the jungle canopy, a column of blue-white fire rose 30 meters into the morning sky, its base hidden somewhere in the island's interior. But satellite images hadn't captured the flame's true nature. It wasn't burning upward like normal combustion. Instead, the energy seemed to be flowing in complex helical patterns, forming geometric structures that shifted and reformed every few seconds. "Jesus Christ," Kieran whispered, his camera clicking frantically. "Elena, are you seeing this?" She was seeing it, but her brain refused to process what her instruments were telling her. The quantum field readings indicated the presence of exotic matter, theoretical particles that existed only in the most advanced physics models. The energy signature suggested a contained fusion reaction, but one operating at room temperature without any visible containment system. A sound like distant thunder rolled across the water, though the sky remained cloudless. Elena's detector showed a massive spike in quantum activity, and for a moment, the flame above the jungle seemed to pulse, sending waves of distortion through the air itself. One of the warriors, an elderly man with intricate scarification covering his chest, stepped forward and spoke in the ancient Sentinelese language. His words were incomprehensible, but his tone carried unmistakable urgency. He pointed toward the flame, then to Elena's equipment, then back to the flame. "He's trying to warn us about something," Kieran said, lowering his camera. Elena's blood ran cold as her detector's readings suddenly flatlined, then began climbing again at an exponential rate. The flame was building towards something, an energy release that could sterilize everything within a 50-kilometer radius. "We need to leave, now." But as they turned back toward their boat, Elena realized they might already be too late. The makeshift laboratory hummed with jury-rigged equipment as Sarah bent over her salvage spectrometer, its display casting blue shadows across her weathered face. 3 days had passed since her escape from the research vessel, 3 days of hiding in an abandoned weather station on a forgotten atoll while the Indian Navy swept the waters searching for her. The stolen data from the flame burned in her mind like a fever. "Impossible," she whispered for the 100th time, staring at the quantum signature readings. The flame wasn't just defying thermodynamics, it was operating on principles that shouldn't exist in their universe. The energy patterns suggested dimensional folding, space-time manipulation at a scale that made her theoretical work look like children's finger painting. Her satellite phone buzzed. Marcus Chen's voice crackled through the static. "Sarah, please tell me you're somewhere safe. The whole scientific community is going insane. 3 more research teams have gone dark in the last 48 hours. Gone dark? How?" Sarah's blood chilled. Communication blackouts. The Indonesian team vanished completely. Their ship was found drifting empty. And Sarah, there's something else. The flame signature is showing up in other locations. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. "What do you mean, other locations?" Satellite thermal imaging detected similar energy patterns in the Mariana Trench, deep in the Amazon, somewhere under the Antarctic ice sheet. Whatever's happening, it's not isolated to the Sentinelese anymore. Through her laboratory window, Sarah watched storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The weather had been increasingly erratic since her arrival, violent squalls appearing from nowhere, electromagnetic disturbances that played havoc with her equipment, as if reality itself was becoming unstable. "Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. The data I collected suggests we're dealing with something that exists partially outside our dimensional framework. The tribe isn't guarding just a flame, they're maintaining some kind of barrier." A new voice cut through the static, cold and authoritative. "Dr. Chen, this is Director Harrison, NSA. This conversation is being monitored for national security purposes." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She'd been traced. "Sarah?" Marcus's voice was tight with fear. "Are you there?" Before she could respond, the phone went dead. Through her window, she spotted the dark silhouettes of helicopters approaching from the north, flying low and fast. Her sanctuary had become a trap. Working with desperate efficiency, Sarah began downloading her data onto encrypted drives, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards. The helicopters grew louder, their rotors churning the air into violent whirlwinds. She had minutes at most. Her spectrometer suddenly screamed an alarm. The quantum readings were spiking wildly, as if responding to some distant disturbance. On her screen, energy signatures bloomed like flowers of fire across the global satellite network. The Amazon site had just activated. Then the Antarctic. The ocean floor reading blazed brighter than a star. The first helicopter touched down outside, disgorging figures in tactical gear. Sarah grabbed her drives and ran for the station's rear exit, but stopped dead when she saw the second team already in position. Through her equipment's displays, she watched the quantum cascade accelerating across the planet's surface. "Dr. Sarah Chen," a voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is Colonel Martinez, U.S. Special Operations. You're in possession of classified materials vital to global security. Surrender immediately." Sarah laughed bitterly. They still thought this was about national interests, about weapons or energy sources. They couldn't comprehend that they were dealing with something that made such concerns obsolete. A new sound reached her ears, a deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to come from the Earth itself. Her equipment registered massive gravitational fluctuations. Outside, the tactical teams were shouting in confusion as their electronics began failing one by one. The ocean around the atoll started to glow. Sarah's blood hammered in her temples as she realized what was happening. The flame sites weren't just activating randomly. They were responding to the increased attention, to the electromagnetic noise of satellites and research vessels and military operations. Humanity's very attempts to study them were triggering some kind of defensive protocol. The thrumming intensified, and Sarah felt her bones vibrating in harmony with frequencies that shouldn't exist. Through her window, she watched the tactical teams staggering, their equipment sparking and dying. The helicopter's engines coughed and failed. In that moment of impossible silence, Sarah understood. The Sentinelese hadn't been guarding humanity from the flame. They'd been protecting the flame from humanity. And now, after centuries of careful isolation, that protection was breaking down. The encrypted drives felt heavy in her hands as she made her choice. The rear exit beckoned, leading to a small boat she'd kept fueled and ready. Behind her, the laboratory's computers displayed the final truth. The global quantum cascade was accelerating, and there was only one place left to go for answers. The storm clouds overhead began to spiral in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and Sarah ran toward the only destination that mattered, back to where it all began, back to the impossible flame that was remaking the world. The submersible's hull groaned against the crushing depths as Maya guided them through the underwater canyon. 200 meters below the surface of the Bay of Bengal, the water pressed against the vessel with over 20 atmospheres of pressure. Through the porthole, bioluminescent creatures drifted past like living stars in an alien sky. "The readings are off the charts," Chen whispered, his eyes fixed on the quantum field detector. The device hummed with an intensity Maya had never heard before. "Whatever's down here, it's generating massive quantum fluctuations." Captain Torres monitored their position from the pilot's seat. "We're approaching the coordinates. Maya, you need to see this." Maya pressed her face to the forward viewing window and gasped. Below them, carved into the seafloor, lay the remnants of a vast structure. Geometric patterns spiraled outward from a central dome, their surfaces covered in the same luminescent symbols they'd seen on the island. But these weren't ancient ruins weathered by time. They pulsed with active energy, creating ripples in the quantum field that made the water itself shimmer. "It's a city," Torres breathed. "An entire underwater city." The submersible descended toward the central dome, where an opening large enough for their vessel waited. Maya's heart raced as she realized it wasn't coincidence. The entrance had been designed for their arrival. The Sentinelese hadn't just been guarding a flame, they'd been waiting for someone to discover what lay beneath. As they passed through the opening, emergency lighting activated along the tunnel walls. The water around them began to drain away with impossible speed, creating an air pocket that expanded to encompass their entire vessel. Within minutes, they found themselves floating in a vast underwater chamber filled with breathable atmosphere. "That's physically impossible," Chen stammered. "The pressure differential alone should have—" "Nothing about this place follows our physics," Maya interrupted, already reaching for her helmet. The atmospheric readings showed perfect oxygen levels and normal pressure. Against every survival instinct, she opened the hatch. The air that filled her lungs carried an electric taste, like the moments before lightning strikes. Around them, the chamber stretched upward into darkness, its walls covered in the same quantum equations Maya had been deciphering. But here they moved and shifted, rearranging themselves in real time. A sound echoed from the depths below, footsteps on metal flooring. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, wearing environment suits that seemed to bend light around their edges. When they removed their helmets, Maya found herself staring at faces that were undeniably human, yet somehow different. Their eyes held depths that spoke of knowledge accumulated across centuries. Dr. Maya Patel, the central figure, spoke in perfect English, though his accent carried undertones of languages that predated recorded history. "We have been monitoring your work. Your understanding of quantum mechanics approaches what we have known for generations." "Who are you?" Maya's voice echoed in the vast space. "What is this place?" "We are the true guardians," the man replied. "The tribe above protects the flame, but we tend to its source. What you call impossible fire is merely the visible manifestation of something far greater, a quantum field that exists outside the normal flow of time." He gestured to the moving equations on the walls. "Your species is approaching a critical juncture. The same forces that created this flame could either elevate humanity beyond its current limitations or destroy it entirely. The choice depends on understanding rather than exploitation." Chen's detector began screaming warnings. "Maya, the quantum fluctuations are spiking. Something's happening to the flame above." Through a series of crystalline screens that materialized from the walls, they could see the sacred fire on the island. It had grown to twice its previous size, and its light now pulsed in rhythm with Maya's own heartbeat. The Sentinelese warriors stood in a protective circle around it, their chanting barely audible over the quantum field's resonance. "The flame responds to consciousness," the Guardian explained. "Your arrival has awakened dormant pathways in the quantum substrate. But others have detected this awakening as well, forces that would use this power for control rather than enlightenment." On another screen, satellite imagery showed military vessels converging on their position from 3 directions. Maya recognized the configuration: Chinese naval destroyers, American submarines, and what appeared to be a private military fleet flying no national flags. "The corporate interests that ended your career have been tracking quantum anomalies worldwide," the Guardian continued. "They believe this flame could provide unlimited energy. They do not understand that it exists in a delicate balance with forces beyond their comprehension." Torres checked their communications array. "We're being hailed by multiple vessels. They're demanding we surface immediately and surrender any findings to international oversight." Maya felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. The Guardian watched her with ancient eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "The knowledge we possess could transform your understanding of reality itself, but it comes with responsibility that your species has never before faced." Above them, the flame pulsed brighter, and Maya realized that whatever decision she made in the next few moments would echo across the future of human consciousness itself. The submarine's hull groaned against the crushing depths as Maya watched the sonar readings spiral into chaos. What had started as routine navigation had become a descent into impossibility. The quantum signatures radiating from the island below were rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in real time, creating pockets of space where matter behaved according to rules that shouldn't exist. Dr. Chen, you need to see this. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice carried an edge of barely contained panic. The young officer had been monitoring the external cameras, and his face had gone pale as bone. Maya moved to his station, her legs unsteady as the submarine lurched through another gravitational anomaly. The external feed showed the ocean floor far below, illuminated by the sub's powerful spotlights. But instead of the expected sediment and scattered debris, the seafloor pulsed with veins of the same ethereal light that crowned the island above. "It's spreading," she whispered, her mind racing through the implications. The flame wasn't just defying physics on the surface, it was transforming the very fabric of reality in an expanding sphere of influence. The ocean itself was becoming a conductor for whatever impossible energy source fueled the eternal fire. Captain Hayes joined them, his weathered face grim as he studied the readings. How long before it reaches inhabited areas? Maya pulled up her quantum modeling software, fingers flying across the keyboard as she input the new variables. The calculations made her stomach clench. If the expansion rate remains constant, the affected zone will reach the mainland in 72 hours. But if it accelerates... She couldn't finish the sentence. The implications were too terrifying to voice. The submarine's communication system crackled to life, cutting through their conversation. "Deep Explorer, this is Phoenix Control. We're reading massive electromagnetic disturbances from your position. What's your status?" Hayes grabbed the radio. "Phoenix Control, we're encountering unprecedented phenomena. The target island is generating some kind of field that's affecting local space-time. We need immediate consultation with theoretical physics teams." Static filled the channel for several seconds before a different voice responded, one that made Maya's blood run cold. "Dr. Chen, this is Director Walsh. I believe it's time we had a conversation about your real reasons for being there." The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. Walsh, her former colleague who had helped orchestrate her disgrace, was somehow monitoring their mission. But how could he have known she was aboard unless... "You've been tracking me," she said into the radio, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. This whole expedition was a setup. Not a setup, Maya. A necessity. We've been monitoring the quantum anomalies for months, ever since your initial research suggested such phenomena might be possible. When satellite data confirmed the island's existence, we needed someone with your specific expertise to investigate. Captain Hayes looked between Maya and the radio with growing alarm. "Dr. Chen, do you want to explain what's happening here?" Before Maya could respond, the submarine's hull shuddered violently. Every light flickered, and for a moment, the impossible happened. Maya saw her reflection in the metal bulkhead ripple like water, her image briefly splitting into multiple overlapping versions of herself existing simultaneously. "Quantum superposition," she breathed, understanding flooding through her. The flame isn't just burning without fuel, it's burning reality itself, breaking down the barriers between parallel states of existence. The communications system erupted in Walsh's urgent voice. "Maya, listen to me carefully. Our models indicate that if the field reaches critical mass, it could trigger a cascade reaction across the entire quantum substrate. Reality itself could begin unraveling on a global scale. Then why send us here?" she demanded. "If you knew the risks." "Because you're the only person who might be able to stop it. Your work on quantum entanglement reversal, the research that got you exiled from the academic community. We think it might be the key to containing the phenomenon." Maya closed her eyes, memories of her failed experiments flooding back. The theoretical framework that had destroyed her reputation suggested that quantum entanglements could be forcibly collapsed, returning superposed states to singular reality. But the energy requirements were astronomical, and the margin for error was essentially zero. "Even if the theory is sound, I'd need direct access to the source," she said. "The flame itself, which means going to the island," Hayes said grimly, "into the heart of the anomaly." Through the submarine's viewports, Maya could see the water around them beginning to glow with the same unearthly light that emanated from the seafloor. Particles of matter flickered in and out of existence, creating brief constellations of impossible beauty before winking away into nothingness. "Captain, how close can you get us to the island?" she asked, her decision crystallizing with terrifying clarity. "In these conditions? Maybe half a kilometer before the interference makes navigation impossible. You'd have to take a launch boat the rest of the way." Maya nodded, already calculating the risks. The indigenous tribe that guarded the flame had protected their secret for centuries. Approaching their sacred island uninvited could provoke a hostile response. But with reality itself beginning to unravel around them, diplomatic concerns seemed almost quaint. "Prepare the launch," she said. "I'm going ashore." The ancient chamber stretched deeper into the island's core than Sarah had imagined possible. The walls bore markings that seemed to shift and writhe in the eternal flame's light, quantum equations bleeding into pictographs that told stories older than recorded history. Dr. Kanan moved beside her with reverent steps, his earlier hostility replaced by something approaching awe. "The elders brought me here only twice before," he whispered, his voice echoing off crystalline formations that jutted from the ceiling like frozen lightning. "Each time I understood less than I thought I did." Sarah's instruments hummed with readings that shouldn't exist. The quantum field strength here registered off every scale she'd built. Temperature readings fluctuated wildly. Her thermal sensors detected pockets of absolute zero mere inches from areas registering temperatures that should have vaporized the rock itself. "This isn't just a flame," she breathed, approaching the central pillar where the fire danced without consuming anything. "It's a controlled quantum cascade. Look at these energy signatures." She held up her tablet, showing Kanan the impossible data streams. The flame existed in multiple states simultaneously, matter and antimatter locked in perfect harmony, creating energy without the catastrophic annihilation that physics demanded. "Your people have been guarding a perpetual motion machine that works on quantum principles we're only beginning to understand." Kanan studied the readings, his scientific training warring with generations of inherited responsibility. The stories say the flame chose this place because the boundaries were thin here, between worlds, between possibilities. Sarah moved closer to the central fire, her skin tingling with electromagnetic feedback. The flame stood 12 feet tall now, easily twice the size it had been in the satellite images from just weeks ago. As she watched, tendrils of pure energy spiraled outward, probing the air like seeking fingers. "It's not just growing," she realized aloud. "It's learning." Her quantum field detector began screaming warnings. The flame pulsed, and for a split second, Sarah saw through it. Through the rock, through the earth, through space itself. Mathematical principles that had tormented her for years suddenly blazed with crystalline clarity. The unified field theory that had eluded Einstein, the bridge between quantum mechanics and general relativity, it was all there, written in light and possibility. "Dr. Chen," Kanan's voice carried a note of alarm. "You need to see this." She turned from the flame to find him pointing at her instruments. Every screen showed the same thing, quantum tunneling events cascading outward from their location, spreading through the Earth's crust like ripples in a pond. The flame's growth wasn't just local anymore. It was affecting quantum states across the entire region. "How long has this acceleration been happening?" she asked. The elders noticed changes 3 months ago. Small things at first, fish behaving strangely, unusual aurora displays despite our latitude. Then the flame began growing taller each day. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. If the quantum field continued expanding at this rate, it would destabilize atomic bonds across thousands of square miles. The boundaries between probable and actual would blur until reality itself became negotiable. "There's something else," Kanan said quietly. "The reason Chief Arjun finally agreed to let you see this. The flame isn't just growing, it's been communicating. Communicating how?" He led her to a section of the wall where the ancient markings seemed fresher, sharper than the others. These appeared last week. Our linguist says they're not from any known script, but they follow mathematical patterns. Sarah examined the symbols, her quantum background helping her recognize the underlying structure. They weren't just random marks. They were equations, but equations that described impossible things, folding space, reversing entropy, bridging separate timelines. Whatever intelligence created this flame, it's trying to teach us something, she said. But why now? Why after centuries of dormancy? The answer came not from Canaan but from her satellite phone, buzzing with an emergency message from her research team back in Boston. Dr. Martinez's words chilled her. Sarah, we're detecting quantum anomalies worldwide. Small at first, but accelerating. Whatever you've found, it's not isolated anymore. The flame pulsed again, brighter this time, and Sarah felt something vast and alien brush against her consciousness. For a terrifying moment, she glimpsed the truth. The flame wasn't just a power source or even a communication device. It was a beacon, sending signals across dimensions to something that had been waiting patiently for humanity to evolve enough to understand. And now, finally, that something was beginning to answer. The walls around them vibrated with harmonics that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in their bones. The flame stretched higher, and reality rippled like disturbed water. Sarah realized with growing horror that her presence here, her instruments and observations, had somehow triggered the acceleration. The quantum observer effect, she thought desperately. By measuring the flame, I've changed it. Now the question was whether she could understand its message before it transformed their world beyond recognition. The quantum field readings spiked beyond comprehension as Sarah approached the sacred grove. Her makeshift detector, cobbled together from salvaged equipment, screamed warnings that she forced herself to ignore. The Sentinelese had led her here through paths that seemed to shift between steps, reality bending like heated glass around the ancient flame's influence. Kyle walked beside her, his weathered face grave with the weight of revelations yet to come. "Your instruments cannot measure what you're about to witness," he said, his English carrying the cadence of someone translating thoughts from a much older tongue. "The flame does not exist in your dimension alone." The trees parted, revealing a circular clearing where the impossible fire danced without fuel, without ash, without end. But Sarah's breath caught not at the flame itself, but at what surrounded it. Metallic structures erupted from the earth in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Configurations that suggested 12 dimensions folded into 3 space-time origami that predated human civilization by millennia. "My God," she whispered, her detector's readings flattening as if the device had simply given up trying to process the impossible. "This isn't natural. This isn't even terrestrial." Marcus emerged from behind one of the structures, no longer the colleague she remembered. His clothes hung in tatters, his hair had grown wild, but his eyes burned with the same unnatural light that flickered in the flame. "Sarah, you came, just as the calculations predicted." "Marcus, what have you done to yourself?" She took a step back, noting how the other team members who'd arrived before her stood motionless around the clearing's perimeter, their faces blank, their eyes reflecting that same eerie luminescence. "I've evolved," he said simply. "The flame showed me what we really are, what we've always been. Humanity isn't native to this reality, Sarah. We're refugees from a dying universe, and this," he gestured to the impossible fire, "is our anchor point, our only way home." The flame pulsed, and suddenly Sarah could see it. Layers of existence peeling away like onion skin, revealing the fundamental architecture of reality itself. The fire wasn't burning in their dimension, it was burning through it, a quantum lighthouse casting its beacon across the void between universes. And in that light she saw the truth that had driven her predecessor to madness decades ago. Earth was a lifeboat. Humanity, a species of interdimensional castaways whose original universe had collapsed into quantum foam eons ago. The Sentinelese weren't just the flame's guardians, They were the last pure descendants of the original refugees, their genetic memory intact, their purpose crystallized across generations. The satellite images, she gasped, understanding flooding through her. The flame is growing stronger because something's happening to our anchor point. The barriers between dimensions are weakening. Kyle nodded solemnly. Your species has forgotten its origin, but the flame remembers. It calls to its children scattered across your world, preparing for the great transition. Soon, all of humanity will remember what you were, what you are meant to become. Marcus stepped closer, his hand extended. Join us, Sarah. Your quantum expertise could help stabilize the process. Without proper guidance, the transition will tear apart both realities. Billions will die in both universes. The flame flared higher, and Sarah felt its pull like gravity made of memory and longing. Images flooded her mind. Vast crystal cities under alien stars, technology that bent the laws of physics like putty, a civilization of unimaginable beauty consumed by cosmic entropy. Her people, her real home. But with the visions came horror. She saw what the transition would cost. Every living thing on Earth that wasn't descended from the original refugees would be incinerated in the dimensional shift. The planet would become a mere stepping stone, its native biosphere sacrificed to reunite humanity with its cosmic heritage. You're talking about genocide on a planetary scale, she said, fighting against the flame's hypnotic influence. Everything that evolved here naturally will die. Everything dies eventually, Marcus replied, with the cold logic of someone no longer entirely human. At least this death serves a purpose. At least it has meaning. Sarah's hand moved to the device she'd hidden in her jacket, not another quantum detector, but something far more dangerous. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne's final research smuggled out of the facility before her mysterious disappearance. A quantum destabilizer capable of severing interdimensional connections. The flame pulsed again, and she felt her resolve wavering. The longing for home, for her true home among the stars, threatened to overwhelm every moral consideration. Around the clearing, more Sentinelese emerged from the shadows, their eyes reflecting the flame's light like mirrors. They weren't guards, they were witnesses, waiting to see if another child of the Exodus would choose evolution or extinction. Her finger found the destabilizer's activation switch. One choice would save Earth at the cost of humanity's cosmic heritage. The other would doom an entire world to preserve a species that had never truly belonged here. The flame reached toward her like a lover's embrace, and Sarah realized she had perhaps seconds to decide the fate of two universes. The ancient chamber trembled as Sarah's hand hovered inches from the flame's edge. The quantum readings on her scanner had gone beyond erratic. They were showing impossible values that made her question the fundamental nature of reality itself. The flame pulsed with each heartbeat of the dying guardian, Anara, whose labored breathing echoed off the stone walls. "The fire chooses," Anara whispered, her weathered face illuminated by the ethereal blue-white light. "It has waited. For one who understands the spaces between atoms, the dance of particles unseen." Sarah's mind raced through decades of quantum theory, searching for an explanation that wouldn't shatter her understanding of physics. The flame showed no heat signature, consumed no oxygen, yet burned with an intensity that seemed to grow stronger by the minute. Her instruments detected quantum entanglement patterns spanning impossible distances, as if the flame existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Behind her, Marcus pressed against the chamber wall, his corporate facade finally cracking. "The energy readings are off the charts," he muttered into his concealed transmitter. "Whatever this is, it could power half the planet." Chief Kavi stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Anara's shoulder. "Your people have already taken enough. This sacred fire is not for outsiders to possess or exploit." But Anara raised a trembling hand. "No, my chief. The prophecies spoke of this moment, when the fire grows beyond our ability to contain it, when it reaches across the waters to touch distant shores, then the Guardian must pass the knowledge to one who can prevent catastrophe. Sarah's scanner suddenly erupted in alarm. The quantum field surrounding the flame was expanding exponentially, creating ripples in space-time that her instruments could barely detect. It's not just growing stronger, she realized aloud. It's becoming unstable. If this pattern continues— What? Marcus demanded, abandoning his pretense of being a simple research assistant. The quantum cascade could propagate beyond this chamber. Beyond this island. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. It could unravel the atomic bonds that hold matter together across vast distances. Anara nodded weakly. Now you understand why we have guarded it for 1,000 years, why only one family line has carried the burden of keeping it contained. The flame suddenly flared, sending waves of invisible energy rippling outward. Sarah felt the disturbance in her bones. A sensation like reality itself was being stretched thin. Her scanner showed the quantum field had just doubled in size. "I don't understand the science," Chief Kavi said urgently, "but I can see the fear in your eyes. What must be done?" Sarah stared at the impossible fire, her mind grappling with theories that existed only on the bleeding edge of quantum physics. The flame isn't burning fuel in any conventional sense. It's drawing energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations, tapping into the zero-point field itself. But something has disrupted the equilibrium. "The satellites," Marcus said suddenly. "The quantum communication experiments my company has been running. We've been flooding this region with quantum entanglement signals for months." "You fool," Anara gasped. "The fire exists in quantum superposition across multiple realities. Your signals have been destabilizing the barriers between worlds." Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. "That's why it's growing stronger. The quantum interference is causing it to draw energy from parallel dimensions. If it reaches critical mass—" The flame pulsed again, brighter this time. Hairline cracks appeared in the ancient stone walls as reality itself strained under the mounting pressure. Sarah's instruments detected quantum tunneling events occurring at an accelerating rate. "How do we stop it?" Chief Kavi demanded. Anara's eyes found Sarah's. The old ways required a guardian to maintain the quantum resonance through meditation and ritual, keeping the fire balanced between worlds. But the guardian must understand both the ancient wisdom and the new science. "You're asking me to become the guardian," Sarah realized. "The fire has already chosen you. Can you not feel it calling to your mind, seeking to establish quantum entanglement with your consciousness?" Sarah could feel it, a strange tugging sensation in her thoughts, as if something was trying to sync with her brainwaves. The flame seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat now. Marcus stepped forward aggressively. "This is insane. We need to extract samples, study this phenomenon properly. We can't just leave it in the hands of—" His words were cut short as the flame suddenly blazed with the intensity of a small sun. The quantum field expanded again, and Sarah felt reality hiccup around them. For a split second, she saw overlapping images of the chamber, dozens of slightly different versions existing in parallel dimensions. "Choose now," Anara urged, her voice growing weaker. "Accept the bond willingly, or watch as the fire tears through the barriers between worlds and consumes everything in an endless cascade of destruction." Sarah looked at her scanner one last time. The readings showed they had minutes, perhaps less, before the quantum instability reached the point of no return. Taking a deep breath, she reached toward the impossible flame. The quantum field readings spiked beyond anything Elena had ever recorded as she and Kyle approached the sacred grove's heart. Her makeshift instruments, cobbled together from salvaged satellite components and materials found on the island, screamed warnings through their crude displays. The flame ahead pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm that seemed to sync with her own heartbeat. "The ancestors speak louder now," Kyle whispered, his weathered hand gripping the ceremonial staff that marked him as the flame's guardian. "They know change comes." Elena's breath caught as they crested the final ridge. Below them, in a natural amphitheater carved from black volcanic rock, stood the flame that defied everything she understood about physics. It rose 20 feet into the air now, twice the height Kyle remembered from his youth, its blue-white core surrounded by dancing ribbons of light that shifted through impossible colors. But it wasn't the flame itself that made her legs nearly buckle. It was what surrounded it. Dozens of metallic structures, each the size of a shipping container, lay partially buried in the grove's floor. Their surfaces caught and reflected the flame's light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Some were nearly consumed by centuries of jungle growth, while others appeared freshly unearthed, as if the island itself had decided to reveal them. Kyle! Elena's voice barely carried over the flame's low humming. How long have those been here? The old guardian's face was etched with confusion and something deeper, fear. They rise from the earth when the flame grows hungry. My grandfather spoke of seeing 3, my father saw 7. His voice cracked. I count 23. Elena's instruments registered massive electromagnetic disturbances emanating from each structure. The readings were unlike anything in terrestrial science, suggesting technology that operated on principles she could barely comprehend. As they descended into the grove, she noticed that the air itself seemed to thicken, each breath requiring conscious effort. The nearest structure bore markings that weren't quite hieroglyphs, weren't quite mathematical equations. They shifted subtly as Elena watched, rearranging themselves into new configurations that her mind struggled to process. She reached out tentatively to touch the surface. The moment her fingers made contact, the world exploded into sensation. Images flooded her consciousness. Vast ships falling from stars, beings of impossible beauty and terrible purpose, the young Earth racked by catastrophes that reshaped continents. She saw the island forming not through volcanic activity, but through deliberate construction, each rock placed with precision to create resonance patterns that would maintain... Elena! Kyle's shout yanked her back to the present. Her hand was smoking where she'd touched the structure, but she felt no pain. Instead, knowledge burned in her mind like fire. They're not from here, she gasped, stumbling backward. The structures, there's some kind of quantum stabilization network, and the flame, understanding, crashed over her like a cold wave. It's not just burning, it's a beacon. The old guardian's eyes widened. A beacon for what? Before Elena could answer, her satellite phone crackled to life. Impossible at this distance from any tower, but the quantum field was amplifying signals in ways that rewrote the rules. Marcus Holt's voice cut through static that sounded almost musical. Dr. Vasquez, I don't know if you can hear this, but satellite feeds show massive energy signatures converging on your position. Whatever you found down there, it's calling to something in deep space. Elena's blood turned to ice. She looked up through the canopy toward the star-filled sky and saw them, pinpricks of light that moved with purpose, growing brighter by the moment. Not satellites, not aircraft, something else entirely. The ancestors return, Kyle whispered, but his tone held no reverence now, only dread. The flame called them home. More structures began emerging from the earth around them, rising silently through soil and root systems, as if the very island was revealing its true nature. Elena's instruments registered quantum cascade reactions, building toward a crescendo that would either open doorways to unimaginable knowledge or tear reality apart at its fundamental level. "We need to shut it down," she said, though even as the words left her mouth she knew it was impossible. The flame had burned for centuries, growing stronger, preparing for this moment. Everything, the tribe's guardianship, her own exile and subsequent arrival, even Holt's corporate machinations, had been orchestrated by forces beyond human understanding. The lights in the sky grew brighter, descending with purpose that made Elena's enhanced understanding scream warnings. Whatever came next would reshape not just the island, not just the tribe that had guarded its secret, but the entire trajectory of human civilization. She grabbed Kyle's arm as the quantum field reached critical resonance. Around them, the ancient structures hummed with awakening power, and the impossible flame danced higher, welcoming its creators home. The ancient chamber trembled as Sarah pressed her palm against the crystalline surface surrounding the eternal flame. Energy coursed through her body like liquid lightning, and suddenly she could see, really see, what the fire truly was. It wasn't burning at all. The flame was a tear in space-time itself, a wound in reality that had been carefully maintained for over 3,000 years. Through that breach, energy from another dimension poured endlessly into their world, contained only by the precise harmonic frequencies generated by the tribe's daily rituals. "You understand now," Elder Cameron said, his weathered face illuminated by the impossible light. "Your people call it quantum mechanics, but we have known this truth since before your cities rose from the earth." Sarah's mind raced as the implications crashed over her. The growing intensity of the flame that had brought her here wasn't a sign of instability, it was the dimensional barrier weakening. Without the tribe's constant vigilance, the breach would expand exponentially, eventually tearing reality apart. "The satellites," she whispered. "The electromagnetic interference from orbit is disrupting your frequency patterns." Marcus Chen stepped forward from behind her, his expression grim. "Which explains why the phenomenon has been accelerating since we launched the new surveillance network last month." The tribal guardian named Ashwin, who had guided them through the labyrinthine caves, spoke urgently in his native tongue. Kaman's face darkened as he translated. "More of your people approached the island. Military vessels." Sarah's blood went cold. "Director Walsh found us." Through the crystal walls, she could feel the harmonic disruption growing stronger. The flame writhed and expanded, its edges becoming increasingly unstable. In the distance, the sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the caverns. "How long can you maintain the barrier?" Sarah asked desperately. "Hours, perhaps less," Kaman replied. "The interference grows stronger with each passing moment. Our singers are already exhausted." Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. "There has to be a way to strengthen the containment. You've studied quantum field theory." "This is beyond anything in our textbooks," Sarah interrupted. But even as she spoke, an idea began forming. The harmonic frequencies the tribe used weren't just mystical tradition, they were sophisticated quantum manipulation, operating on principles she was only beginning to grasp. She pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen as she accessed the quantum field equations she'd been working on for years. The frequency modulation, if we could amplify it using quantum resonance principles. "The chamber is designed for human voices," Kaman said. "Your machines cannot replicate what our people have learned through generations of practice. But they can enhance it," Sarah realized. "Marcus, do you still have the emergency transmitter from the helicopter?" He nodded, pulling the device from his pack. Sarah began rapidly modifying its frequency output, her fingers working with desperate precision. The sound of boots on stone echoed from the tunnel entrance. Ashwin barked commands to the other tribal members, who quickly moved to defensive positions despite being vastly outnumbered. "Whatever you're planning, do it fast," Marcus urged. Sarah finished her modifications and looked up at Kaman. "I need your singers to maintain their rhythm exactly. The transmitter will create a quantum resonance field that should amplify and stabilize your harmonics, but the timing has to be perfect." The elder nodded solemnly and called out instructions in his ancient language. The tribal singers, who had been maintaining a low chant throughout their conversation, adjusted their tone and cadence. Heavy footsteps grew closer. Director Walsh's voice boomed from the tunnel. "Dr. Chen, we know you're in there. Surrender the physicist and the artifact, and no one needs to be harmed." Sarah activated the transmitter just as armed soldiers rounded the corner into the sacred chamber. The modified frequency waves merged with the tribal harmonics, creating a resonance field that made the air itself shimmer. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The chaotic edges of the dimensional flame suddenly stabilized, its wild fluctuations smoothing into a steady, controlled burn. The quantum breach sealed to its original size, the dangerous expansion halting completely. But the victory was short-lived. Director Walsh strode into the chamber with a dozen armed operatives, his face twisted with a mixture of awe and greed as he stared at the impossible flame. "Magnificent," he breathed. "Do you have any idea what we could accomplish with unlimited energy? What this discovery means for global power structures?" "You can't control it," Sarah said, stepping protectively in front of the tribal singers. "Remove them from this chamber, disrupt the harmonic balance for more than a few minutes, and the dimensional breach will expand beyond any hope of containment." Walsh smiled coldly. "Then I suppose we'll have to ensure their cooperation permanently." He raised his sidearm toward Elder Kaman, but Marcus moved faster, tackling the director as the weapon discharged harmlessly into the crystal ceiling. In the chaos that followed, as soldiers moved to subdue them, Sarah made a desperate choice. She lunged for the transmitter controls and began overloading the quantum resonance field. The chamber filled with blinding light as reality itself began to fracture around them. The quantum field readings spiked beyond anything Sarah had ever witnessed as the flame roared 20 feet into the air, its azure core pulsing with an otherworldly rhythm that seemed to match her frantically beating heart. The ancient stone circle around the fire had begun to levitate, massive blocks defying gravity as they slowly rotated in perfect synchronization. "The resonance cascade is accelerating," she shouted over the deafening hum that filled the cavern. "Whatever's happening, it's reaching critical mass." Kyle pressed his weathered hands against the trembling ground, his eyes reflecting the supernatural light. The ancestors spoke of this moment. When the flame grows hungry enough to taste the sky, the choice must be made. Through her instrument's display, Sarah watched in horror as the quantum signature expanded exponentially. The flame wasn't just burning, it was consuming the very fabric of reality around it, creating a growing bubble where the fundamental laws of physics no longer applied. Within that sphere, she could see impossible geometries folding in on themselves, glimpses of spaces that existed between dimensions. Marcus grabbed her arm, his face pale with terror. "Sarah, look at the water!" The underground lake that fed into the cavern had begun to flow upward, defying gravity as it spiraled around the flame in perfect helical patterns. Fish swam through the air, their movements creating trails of bioluminescence that lingered like frozen lightning. "It's a dimensional breach," Sarah whispered, the implications crashing over her like a tidal wave. "The flame isn't just accessing zero-point energy, it's opening a gateway to parallel realities where different physical laws govern existence." The tribal elders who had been maintaining their protective chant suddenly fell silent. Their leader, a woman whose age seemed to stretch back centuries, stepped forward with deliberate calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "Dr. Chen," she called out, her voice somehow cutting through the cacophony. "Your people's machines have awakened what should have remained dormant. The flame has always been a doorway, but never before has it been forced open so wide." Sarah's quantum detector screamed warnings as reality continued to fracture. Through the expanding breach, she caught glimpses of other Earths, some where the oceans boiled under alien suns, others where impossible crystal cities stretched into purple skies. In one terrifying flash, she saw a world consumed by the same azure flames, its surface cracked and lifeless. "There are others trying to reach us," Marcus said, pointing his camera toward the flame's heart, where shadowy figures seemed to be moving within the light. "Something's coming through." The first entity emerged like smoke given form, its impossible anatomy shifting between states of matter. Where it touched the cavern floor, the stone transformed into something that wasn't quite rock, wasn't quite metal, but possessed properties of both and neither. More shapes followed, each one a violation of everything Sarah understood about biology and physics. They're explorers, she realized with sudden clarity, from dimensions where consciousness evolved differently. They've been trying to reach our reality through quantum tunnels, and the flame is their anchor point. Kyle's expression grew grim. The old stories say these visitors came before, long ago. They offered knowledge beyond imagination, but the price He gestured toward the entities, which were now examining the terrified humans with what might have been curiosity. They cannot exist in our world without changing it. Their presence alone rewrites the rules. Sarah watched her instruments malfunction as the dimensional breach expanded further. The readings made no sense. Temperature, pressure, and electromagnetic fields fluctuated wildly as different physical constants bled through from parallel realities. She was witnessing the birth of a cosmic catastrophe, a merging of incompatible universes that would destroy both. "There has to be a way to close it," she said desperately, running calculations in her head. "If we could reverse the quantum entanglement, create a feedback loop that forces the breach to collapse." "The flame accepts sacrifice," the elder said solemnly. "Someone must enter its heart willingly, become the bridge between worlds that allows the doorway to seal. But they will not return unchanged, if they return at all." Marcus lowered his camera, his face set with grim determination. "I'll do it. This is my fault for pushing the expedition forward. I should—" "No." Sarah stepped toward the flame, feeling its alien heat wash over her skin. "This requires someone who understands quantum mechanics on an intuitive level, someone who can navigate the dimensional mathematics while maintaining enough coherent thought to trigger the collapse sequence." The interdimensional entities seemed to sense her intention, their forms shifting with what might have been approval or warning. The flame itself pulsed brighter, as if responding to her proximity. "Sarah, wait," Marcus pleaded. "We don't know what will happen to you in there." She turned back one final time, memorizing his face and the wonder-struck expressions of the tribal guardians. "Whatever I become on the other side, remember why this mattered. Remember that we touched something infinite." The flame reached out to embrace her, and Sarah Chen stepped willingly into the heart of impossible fire. The quantum field fluctuations had reached critical mass. Sarah's instruments screamed warnings as reality itself began to buckle around the eternal flame. The Sentinelese elders chanted in harmonies that seemed to resonate with frequencies beyond human hearing, their voices weaving through dimensions she was only beginning to understand. "It's not just a flame," Sarah whispered, her datapad displaying impossible readings. "It's a portal, a gateway between quantum states." The tribal leader, Anu, stepped forward, his weathered face grave. Through the translation device Marcus had cobbled together from salvaged equipment, his words carried the weight of centuries. "Your people seek to understand what should remain hidden. The flame chooses when to reveal itself." Sarah watched as the fire pulsed with renewed intensity, each surge sending ripples through the fabric of space-time. The satellite data had been right. The flame was growing stronger, but not in any way she'd anticipated. It wasn't consuming more fuel or burning hotter. It was expanding across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. "The Chinese expedition," she said, realization dawning. "They didn't just find the island. They disturbed something that's been in perfect balance for millennia." Marcus nodded grimly, his equipment detecting electromagnetic anomalies that defied classification. "The quantum entanglement field is destabilizing. Whatever this flame is connected to, it's responding to outside interference." Through the jungle canopy, the sound of approaching helicopters grew louder. Sarah's heart raced as she recognized the distinctive whine of military aircraft. Dr. Chen had found them, and this time he wouldn't underestimate the island's defenses. Anu raised his hand, and the other Sentinelese warriors melted into the forest with practiced silence. "Your enemy comes with machines that think they can capture starlight in bottles," he said. "They understand nothing." The first helicopter crested the tree line, its searchlights cutting through the perpetual twilight that surrounded the flame's sacred grove. Sarah could see armed soldiers rappelling down ropes, their movements precise and coordinated. Chen had brought a full military escort. "Sarah Chen!" Dr. Chen's amplified voice boomed across the clearing. "You cannot hide behind primitive superstitions forever. The flame belongs to science, not savages." The quantum physicist in Sarah bristled at the dismissive terminology, but the human in her recoiled at the casual racism. She stepped into the open, hands raised but defiant. The only primitive thinking here is yours, Chen. This isn't just an energy source. It's a conscious interface with quantum reality. Dr. Chen emerged from behind his soldiers, flanked by technicians carrying equipment Sarah didn't recognize. Quantum field manipulators, she realized with growing dread. He intended to forcibly extract the flame from its dimensional anchor. Consciousness in quantum mechanics is a romantic notion, Chen said, gesturing for his team to set up their apparatus. What we have here is simply an exotic matter reaction that we haven't classified yet. Nothing more. The eternal flame flickered, and for a terrifying moment, Sarah thought it might extinguish entirely. The temperature around the grove plummeted, and frost began forming on nearby vegetation. The quantum field readings spiked beyond her instrument's ability to measure. Anyu's eyes widened in alarm. The flame grows cold, the balance breaks. As Chen's technicians activated their extraction equipment, reality hiccuped. Sarah watched in horror as temporal distortions began manifesting around the flame. Past and future seemed to blur together. She glimpsed the island as it had been centuries ago, pristine and untouched, then saw possible futures where the flame's energy had been harnessed and corrupted. "Stop!" she screamed at Chen. "You're destabilizing the entire quantum matrix." But Chen was lost in scientific fervor, his instruments detecting energy patterns that promised to revolutionize human civilization. He couldn't see what Sarah's more sensitive equipment revealed, that the flame wasn't just a power source, but a keystone holding together multiple dimensional layers. The Sentinelese warriors struck with supernatural precision, emerging from the jungle like ghosts made manifest. Their weapons, Sarah realized, weren't just traditional spears and arrows. They'd been quantum-enhanced by centuries of proximity to the flame, capable of disrupting the molecular bonds of modern equipment. Helicopters crashed as their electronics failed catastrophically. Soldiers found their weapons dissolving in their hands, the metal reverting to component atoms. Chen's extraction apparatus sparked and died, its quantum field manipulators turning to crystalline dust. But the damage was done. The flame guttered and swayed, its connection to the dimensional matrix severely compromised. Sarah could feel reality itself becoming unstable, threatening to cascade into a quantum collapse that would unmake not just the island, but potentially space-time itself within a radius she couldn't calculate. "There's still time," Anu said, his voice carrying desperate hope. "The flame remembers harmony, but it requires a bridge between your world and ours." Sarah understood immediately. The flame needed a quantum physicist who could consciously interface with its dimensional properties, someone willing to become a permanent guardian of the boundary between realities. Looking at Marcus, then at the terrified faces of Chen's surviving soldiers, she made her choice. The quantum field fluctuated wildly as Sarah's hand hovered inches from the impossible flame. Every instrument she'd brought screamed warnings. Radiation levels spiking, electromagnetic readings off the charts, reality itself seeming to bend around the ancient fire that had burned without fuel for over 3,000 years. "The calculations were wrong," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the strange harmonic resonance emanating from the flame. Behind her, Kyle and the remaining members of the Sentinelese tribe watched with expressions caught between reverence and terror. They had guarded this secret for generations, and now she understood why. The flame wasn't just defying physics, it was rewriting them. Dr. Marcus Chen's voice crackled through her earpiece from the research vessel anchored beyond the reef. "Sarah, the satellite readings are going insane. Whatever that thing is, it's affecting quantum fields across a 50-mile radius. You need to get out of there." But Sarah couldn't move. The flame pulsed with patterns that matched her theoretical models for dimensional membrane fluctuation, work that had gotten her laughed out of MIT, work that had cost her everything. Except it hadn't been wrong. It had been prophetic. "It's not from here," she breathed, understanding flooding through her like ice water. "The flame, it's not generating energy, it's channeling it from somewhere else." Kyle stepped forward, his weathered face etched with the weight of ancestral knowledge. In halting English learned from decades of careful contact with the outside world, he spoke. The ancestors knew. The fire. It speaks to the between place, the place where all things touch. Sarah's quantum field detector began shrieking as the flame suddenly doubled in size. The air around it shimmered like heat waves, but the temperature remained constant. Space itself was warping, creating a visible distortion that made her eyes water. "My God!" Chen's voice was tight with panic. "Sarah, we're reading massive gravitational anomalies. The flame just appeared on seismographs in Australia. You're looking at some kind of dimensional anchor." The pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. The flame wasn't just a curiosity, it was a beacon, a lighthouse spanning dimensions, and something was using it to navigate toward their reality. The growing intensity wasn't random, it was a response signal. Her tablet chimed with an incoming data stream from the Deep Space Monitoring Array. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she read the timestamp. 72 hours ago, radio telescopes had detected an anomalous signal from the constellation Draco. The same moment satellite imagery first showed the flame's increased activity. "They're coming back," she whispered. Kyle nodded grimly. "The Star Walkers, our songs, remember. They came before, when the world was young. The flame, it was their gift and their promise." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. An advanced civilization had visited Earth millennia ago, leaving behind this quantum lighthouse as a marker. The Sentinelese hadn't just been guarding a fire, they'd been maintaining humanity's first contact protocol, keeping the beacon alive for the return journey. The flame pulsed again, and Sarah felt something brush against her consciousness, alien, vast, and utterly inhuman. Images flooded her mind, cities that floated between stars, beings of pure energy dancing through cosmic storms, technologies that treated space and time like clay to be molded. But underneath the wonder came terror. These beings operated on scales that made human civilization look like an ant colony. Their return wouldn't necessarily be benevolent. "The choice comes now," Kyle said, his voice heavy with generations of burden. "We can extinguish the flame, break the call, but once dark it can never burn again." Sarah stared at the impossible fire, weighing humanity's future in her hands. If she destroyed the beacon, Earth might remain hidden, safe in its cosmic backwater. But they would also lose any chance of advancement, of joining whatever galactic community existed beyond their small world. Her earpiece erupted with Chen's voice. "Sarah! Emergency signal from NASA. They're tracking multiple objects decelerating from near-light speed in the outer solar system. Estimated arrival at Earth in 6 hours. Too late. The choice had already been made 3,000 years ago, when the first Sentinelese guardian had accepted the responsibility of keeping the flame alive. Humanity was about to meet its makers, ready or not. Sarah stepped back from the flame, her decision crystallizing. She wouldn't be the one to snuff out humanity's first and perhaps only chance at transcendence. The risk was enormous, but the potential, keep it burning, she told Kyle. Whatever happens next, we face it with our eyes open. The old guardian smiled, and for the first time since she'd arrived on the Forbidden Island, Sarah saw hope in his ancient eyes. Above them, the stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with the impossible flame, as if the cosmos itself was holding its breath. Humanity's childhood was ending. What came next would reshape everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. The flame burned brighter, casting shadows that seemed to dance with otherworldly intelligence. And Sarah realized that some secrets were meant to change the world.